Lent is truly a movement of looking inwardly as well as outwardly. So from the beginning of Lent, I've been encouraging our parishioners to focus when we look inwardly, what do we see? We see our heart and our conscience. It is this movement that allows us to really examine the passions of our hearts that may be monitored or tamed by our conscience. But when we look outwardly, we see our body and our actions. Our actions shape the way our body look, whether we are fat or skinny. But that's this whole season of Lent, in that movement of inwardly and outwardly, to kind of help us to re-examine, to renew our body as well as our heart. And so here in the spirit of our parish, we kind of choose this theme in St. Paul's letter. Put on the new self, created in God's way, in righteousness and holiness of truth. It is in this movement where putting on the new self is asking us to look at the action that affects our body, as well as our heart that can shape our conscience. Last Sunday, in the story of the blind man born blind, we see the first I am statement. I am the light of the world. It is in this light we see the man from darkness to see who he is in reality, to see the world as it is in reality. Today we move to chapter 11 of John's Gospel, and help us to recognize another dimensions of who Jesus is. I am the resurrections and the life. And so we move from the blindness of faith to recognize that we are called during the season of Lent to live in fullness of life. And what does that fullness of life look like for you as we approach this final Sundays of Lent? Living in the fullness of life. Whether it's life of faith, life of fears, life of anxieties, life of pain, life of happiness. But there is fullness in that life. So we see in the stories of Lazarus being brought back into life, it is truly a moment of transformations in all of us. Maybe a transformation in re-examining our actions. Maybe our action may have hurt not only our body, but also the body of the world. Maybe looking at our own hearts, how we can monitor so that our conscience will be in alignment with the fullness of the Lord. But in the stories, in the dialogue between Martha and Jesus, we see that beautiful transformations, maybe the blindness of faith that no one sees. Because everyone doubted, and everyone said to Jesus, you can't go there. He's been dead for 4 days. But in this whole beautiful conversation, Jesus asking Martha, do you believe this? And so she turned and said to Jesus, in this very context, yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the Son, the one who is coming into the world. Maybe that is the blindness of faith sometimes, that we too are doubting who Jesus is in his ministries and in our own life. But maybe the affirmations of Martha's proclamation allow us to see that we too believe that Jesus is the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world. But how is it that we can live the fullness of life when we may be squandering our body in a way that hurts us and hurt others? So maybe part of our life journey in the season of Lent is to allow us to die, ultimately experience death. Whether it's emotional death, physical death, or spiritual death, so that Jesus can gather us and allow us to find that tender hope of transformations in being who we are. Pope Francis, in his recent interview by Stampa magazine in Italy, on March 20th, the interviewer was asking Pope Francis these questions. There are many patients infected with the virus known as COVID-19, are dying alone in isolation without being able to say goodbye to their loved ones. What are your words to all these people, Pope Francis? He turned and looked at the interviewer and said the following: I am struck and grieved by the story of a nurse who lent her phone to an elderly woman so that she could say goodbye to her granddaughter. This is the ultimate need, to have her hand taking your hand, to have a last gestures of companions, Pope Francis said. But he said further, the pain of those who die without saying goodbye becomes a wound in the heart of those who remain. And I want to repeat that, because it stuck with me for a long time this past 10 days when I read this verse, or this quotation from Pope Francis. The pain of those who die without saying goodbye becomes a wound in the heart of those who remain. We see in John chapter 11, the pain remained with Jesus, the pain remained with Mary and Martha, who witnessed Lazarus die for 4 days, to the point that Jesus wept. So what is it then that allows us to see in this encounters of Jesus Christ raising Lazarus back from dead into life, so that he too can live in the fullness of life again? What is it that God is asking of you today, tomorrow, and in the futures? That you can transform your body, your heart, in the way what St. Paul inviting us, and we inviting you to put on the new self that you and I have created by God in God's way of righteousness, in God's ways of holiness and truth. What's beautifully about this morning gospel is when Martha turned to Jesus and said, and Jesus responds to her this way at the very beginning of this reading. Master, the one you love is ill. When Jesus heard this, he said, this illness is not to end in death, but is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. The illnesses that we encounter during this coronavirus pandemic will not end in death, but it is truly that the glory of God may reveal through Jesus Christ.